Hi, this is Pat Moorhead with More Insights and Strategy, and we're here for another Retail Tech and Finance Tech Weekly, otherwise known as FinTech. I spelled the whole thing out. But anyways, I'm here with the star of the show, Melody Brew, Vice President and Principal Analyst of Retail Tech and FinTech. How are you, Melody?
How are you doing?
Doing great. Just sliding in. I'm wondering are you and I the only two people working still in Austin?
It, that
as
might
as
be.
information workers. We had a freaking fire drill or something went off in my office, and I'm like the only one on the stairs. I'm the only one, and I'm thinking, okay, either I'm getting old or something's wrong with me, and I heard a fire alarm and somebody told me to get out, or literally I'm the only person working. Well, I was happy to see that on the other side there are a bunch of Google folks and Deloitte folks that apparently just used a different set of stairs. So
I
I
was
am
going to
not
say, I
the
think a lot
only.
of these companies, I think a lot of people still aren't back, excuse me, back to the office full time. I think a lot of Googlers are still working from home, or at least hybrid.
So we have a good show for you today. As we talked about, we're going to be sliding, at least on the fintech side, talking a little bit about the B2B portion, but we want to give retail its due, and it's really mostly about retail today. We're going to be talking about the omni-channel retail experience, the Bopis Shift. I don't know what Bopis means, but I'm hopefully you're going to explain that to me. We're going to talk retail cloud, why it matters, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about Oracle, Google, and Microsoft. So, and we're going to hit my favorite, which is the acronym of the week, which is not Bopis, it's ASRS. This is going to be good.
Yep.
And we're going to talk, like we always do at the very end, kind of what's coming up because the show does go on. So, hey, let's kick this off. Let's hit Bopis, omni-channel retail, and Bopis. What is
Yeah.
it?
So
Why should we care?
Bopis, we talked about this once in our acronym of the week, but it's buy online, pick up in store.
Okay.
So, that there was a big shift in buy online, pick up in store during the pandemic because of social distancing and stores being closed. It was a real way for retailers to get people to come to the store. It eliminates a lot of shipping expenses. People come to the store to pick up. It's a lot faster for consumers. So this Bopis movement, it was happening prior to the pandemic, but certainly was, sort of elevated during the pandemic. What we're seeing now is there isn't as much of a continuation of e-commerce that a lot of people thought was going to happen post-pandemic. People are returning to the store, but we're sort of balancing that with the fact that people don't have as much discretionary income. With the price of gas higher and with inflation, people are really having to kind of look at where they're spending their money and how they're spending their money. And so little things, like the convenience of picking something up in the store and not having that temptation of impulse buying. People think about that. The saving the money on not paying an Instacart fee by just ordering your HEB order and then picking it up there. These are all factors into people's shopping. It's forcing retailers to really think about the whole omni-channel experience because people want that same in-store experience. And this is where like virtual reality comes in and where all of the, like we've talked about this headless commerce, where the speed of the front end has to match, all of the experience that the consumer wants. This will also feed into our talk about retail cloud. But 33% of adults younger than 50 who started using curbside pickup during the pandemic say it's a habit they expect to continue. So how do retailers kind of balance this out? There's a lot of things that they have to consider. That there's the cost of the labor to bring the goods out to the people. There's the lost cost, the lost revenue of those impulse buys. So we're seeing some retailers who are starting to, like Sam's Club, just adding a $4 fee for in-store pickup or curbside pickup for customers who don't have their premium membership. So interesting to see if that's something that consumers will be willing to pay for. A lot of people are really used to convenience fees now, but is that a convenience fee that they're kind of trying to avoid by driving to the store themselves rather than using an Instacart, sort of option, or delivery option? Amazon used to do free delivery for Whole Foods. They now charge. So there's a lot of, and again, this is going to kind of lead into what we're about Retail Cloud, but there's so much data on the customer and the experience that they want, whether they're, if you're ordering your groceries online and then you go to pick them up and the inventory isn't the correct inventory, what you see online and what you're going to get in the store, you're going to be a disappointed customer. So there's a lot going into this omni-channel experience of having that same sort of in-store experience, and that includes inventory, but also that sort of, like the customer service, the try-on, the interaction with employees to ask questions, things like that. All of this that's happening, within a cloud environment that will kind of help for retailers to decide, is this something that's worth keeping? Is it something that consumers are willing to pay for? And is there a shift in the sort of supply chain management that has to happen in order to fulfill this kind of need if 33% of consumers are planning to continue to use that kind of service?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of other businesses, you take a capability and you find out how to make it, a loss leader, or break even type of opportunity. But what I do know is that frontline workers are hard to get and they're hard to keep. And I think, everything from manufacturing to grocery stores to restaurants are still having challenge. About 3% of the workforce never went back to work after COVID. And my hunch is that those weren't information workers; those were primarily frontline workers. What might happen is if this goes from a fad to a trend, which I think you're setting a stage that says it is a trend and it's likely here to stay, they'll find new ways to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in an Amazon warehouse, you don't have pickers going out and picking products.
Yes.
The products come to the picker, and they're basically Kubota robots. I had the chance to do a tour, and it was just fascinating on that whole thing. So
I don't want to spoil our acronym of the week, but the automated storage and retrieval system, that's exactly what you're talking about. And that's where a lot of these retailers are headed, whether it's part of their warehouse, like Best Buy is using part of their retail stores to sort of warehouse the equipment that, or the merchandise that they will be using for the curbside pickup, so that it's sort of separated into a spot that they don't have store workers walking around the store and picking up these items, kind of separating it out so that they can better plan their workforce. Like you're saying, the workforce planning, the frontline workers, it's expensive and they're hard to come by, but there is a lot that's happening around that with this automation. And, this is why the efficient inventory and fulfillment is so important in this. And, again, that's kind of gets us to why Retail Cloud is so important.
Nope. Sounds good. Why don't we move to the next topic, which is kind of related, but not necessarily. That's the retail vertical cloud. I think what we've seen overall is a lot of companies starting off cloud by being more of a horizontal cloud. And as in any maturing business, it starts to go vertical and get a little bit more precise on the offerings.
Yes. Yeah, I think, with retail, I think just across the board, we're looking at, just this sort of season of digital transformation in every industry, right? But with retail, there's the reason why I think that the vertical cloud matters so much there is retailers, that there's really is this kind of peak season support that's needed, that cloud really supports. And certain applications, whether it's POS or whether it's hardware or software, that are so specific to retail and retail needs. And really at the end, the smartest user of data wins here. And if you're, like you said, you're kind of starting out in this horizontal cloud. Those are all, I think, the efficiency of cloud is going to work for, across industries. But when you really look at the specific needs of industry, you look at what retail needs, especially in this kind of pay for what you use model, in these seasonal peaks, and then all of the things that they need kind of to modernize their applications, build new ones, run the flexibility that they need. I think that's really where it can sort of help to transform store operations, digital experiences for consumers, kind of give that personalization that consumers need just across the entire organization. And then, like I said, they can also deploy the software and hardware with the same speed and agility that they can with the cloud services.
Yeah, it is interesting how it's kind of how it's lining up between these folks. Some are creating more ecosystems. Some are creating, truly differentiated retail clouds. Some are, it's a standard cloud, but you have a success team, right? And a marketing team that understands the space better. So, and I think, it's sort of the top folks in there right now that I've seen is Oracle, Google Cloud, and Microsoft. By the way, AWS does a lot of it, but it's funny, a lot of retailers are a little apprehensive about working with AWS because they see them as more of a competitor than anything else. And I think Google, Microsoft, and Oracle have done a pretty good job at driving that and making it a wedge, even maybe if it wasn't a wedge in the first place.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that they're kind of seen as a little bit more agnostic. And I think this is a kind of a fun chance to sort of introduce my new fun, where I turn this around on you. But usually you're asking me a lot of questions, so I'm going to turn this around on you with my new segment. I think, do they have it down, Pat, or are they getting the pat down? This is where we get your expert opinion on cloud. Who's doing it right? What they need to do more of, what they need to do less of. I really think, if I look at Microsoft Azure for cloud-based technology for retail, I think they're doing a lot of things right. I want to see what you think, who's doing things right, and give us the pat down.
No, I like this. Listen, I am not a retail cloud expert, but let me give you. So I'm going to give you a homogeneous response on this. Okay, and I do need to start with AWS here because they're AWS. I mean, AWS from an IaaS perspective, they're really the kings of IaaS. You want bare bones, bare bones cloud, server storage, networking,
Yep.
and security. They're a really good bet. They do a little bit of PaaS for big companies, big software companies, by the way. But they don't do they don't do a lot of SaaS. It's hard to find a huge fault with it, which is one reason why they have the majority of IaaS. And I think Azure does more PaaS than they do IaaS. So I think they're kind of geared around delivering other people's software, helping other people develop an entire software experience by leveraging many of their services. They're number 2 in IaaS, so they're not, necessarily, a small fish here. I would say the amount of compute options is a little bit lighter compared to with AWS, who not only has silicon and compute from AMD, Intel, and NVIDIA, but they also have their own homegrown inference compute as well, and soon to become training silicon out there. So less options. But one thing Microsoft has going for it is that anytime you had a Windows server, which by the way was the predominant way to put infrastructure on your platform. They have a very decent likelihood of getting that business for people who want to move their Windows on-prem that you're running applications on to the Azure cloud. So I think that's a plus. I think Oracle, it's funny. Oracle kind of was their Gen 1 cloud or Gen 1 OCI really wasn't that good. And I think, which by the way, I was so surprised to see OCI Gen 2, which was completely serverless, completely stateless, and really built from the grounds up to be very broadly distributed. And that's why companies like Zoom utilize Oracle, not exclusively, but have enough scale and have enough good technology to host a very difficult application to host, which takes incredibly low latency to pull that off. I do like what they're doing on the industry side with retail. I'll speak out of both sides of my mouth. They have the whole solution, right? They own micros, so all the way from the retail point of sale machines, and you'll see these in a ton of restaurants. You'll have the Oracle applications. So it's applications, infrastructure on site, and you'll have the actual retail application. Not you have to build it yourself, and that, by the way, differentiates itself from Azure, Google, and AWS. They have an actual application. So I would say that they're much more highly integrated, one throat to choke. Okay, right. While I haven't done a price comparison recently, they do, from a list price perspective, have the lowest prices in the industry as well for cloud. And then you have Google Cloud, which, by the way, I think Google Cloud has done an exceptional good job marketing its capabilities as a retail cloud, and they picked up some pretty big customers out there. Home Depot is one of their big ones. Not too close, not too far into the restaurant business, but they on the plus side have incredible AI and analytics capability, and this is where they score best. I mean, this is their land and expand. They go in with AI and they go in with the analytics, and then they try to pick up the other workloads. Like Microsoft and AWS, Google does not have first-party retail software, right? So you're going to have to build your own, and you can run it on IaaS, the whole stack, or you can use some of their AI services to augment what you do in more of a PaaS relationship. But they do not currently offer a SaaS retail offering. So there we go.
Yeah.
Do they have it down pat, or are they getting the pat down? And listen, it's not as binary because there are pluses and pros and cons to all of them.
Yeah. I think if you look, from a small, medium business size to like the large, huge, like Best Buy and Home Depots, you're talking about different needs, and so a lot of these, like the Googles, their Anthos hybrid and multi-cloud platform, that's something that's really scalable for a smaller to medium-sized business that, kind of modernize their existing applications, build new ones, kind of run them more flexibly. I think a lot of these with AWS and with Microsoft, we're looking at, and with Oracle, we're looking at like these large enterprise solutions where right now, in this economy and in this kind of time for small and medium businesses to compete, these companies need to really be concentrating on those SMBs and have solutions for them that allow them to grow and to compete. And that's a really big, important part of our economy.
It's a huge part. And finally, we're seeing some movement in terms of the technology. Gosh, back in the late 80s and to the mid 90s, they were the first companies that talked about big data, right? And it was on a Teradata platform. And the only reason I know this, I was at NCR, who was the point of sale lead, and still had mini computers in actually they were the highest retail share at point of sale. But Kmart, right, was giving credit in the early 90s on doing this amazing thing to be able to predict stockouts and by store, and to know exactly what to buy and when to buy it, as opposed to the bread person coming down. There was somebody who had a paper invoice or was faxed in to say how many they needed, which was based on what they saw in daily cycle counts at the store. And the thing that people actually, it was novel then, is they were taking point of sale information that was actually in their stores, and then they were collating it up in a big, I don't know, it's called a cloud when it's on-prem. It definitely was not a cloud, but it was a big, huge Teradata machine to be able to, and they made a name for themselves, and they clobbered the Kmarts of the world into extinction, I think, because of their ability to know how to do this. But there hadn't been a lot of technology going out there. It's too bad that AWS, I'd like to see more retailers adopt AWS technology, because, I mean, I went to a show recently. It was called Remars in Las Vegas, and they had a full setup of all the retail technology. And whether it's using your palm print to pay, palm to pay,
we talked about that. I love that.
You can do inside today, the ability to just pick up stuff and put it in your bag and walk out of the door is really game changing, and ironic that they're essentially doing the same thing that they did in the 1990s, which was reduce friction. And what they're doing at the physical point of sale again is, it's like one click buying, right? It's like reducing friction in shopping. What's the biggest reason you don't want to go shopping at a store? It's probably the checkout, or the maybe followed by the inability to find what you're looking for. Those are many of the problems that AWS is attacking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, somewhat off topic, but I actually wrote this up in my weekly report, is that their new technology that they're rolling out with mapping out their deliveries so that their drivers are driving fewer miles. So, reducing fuel emissions, and, I think the efficiencies there, I think everybody could learn a lot from. Just the FedEx and UPS are doing similar things, but they're not, in my opinion, they're not as impactful. So they are driving fewer miles, but they're not getting, it doesn't have the customer in mind as much as I think what Amazon's doing with planning out the deliveries so that they are optimized for delivery time, but with fewer miles driven. Rather than, UPS is waiting until like the very, very last possible minute that they can deliver the package to match it with another package being delivered to the same spot. So I don't want my package late, but I also don't want you driving more miles than you need to, so there's a balance there. But yeah, I think the efficiencies there are so important. And again, it kind of goes back to the smarter user of data is going to win.
Yeah, everything's becoming a data problem. Probably one of the hardest ones is self-driving cars, where it's a data problem, but it's also a physical problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't run cars on air, right? There has to actually be something there. Is everything okay?
I don't know. Something just fell down in the other room. There's nobody here.
Okay. Well, if something happens, I'll dial 911. It'll be over soon. Make sure to keep the camera running, though, so we can get it. Okay. Now, hey, let's go to the my favorite part of the week, the acronym of the week. You talked about it a little bit. Not everybody pays attention. So what is it? What is ASRS?
Automated Storage and Retrieval System. This is a really good tie-in now that we've talked about all of this. So it is kind of what you were talking about, like what you saw in an Amazon warehouse, but it is where things are actually, robots are used to automate the storage and retrieval system to fulfill orders. It's actually used speaking of automotive, very often in automotive, it's used in food and beverage and in metals and heavy machinery. So you can kind of see the reason for all of those. So with automotive, there's also heavy machinery parts. There's been kind of supply chain issues. It allows for like the very tight keeping of records of what's inventory, what's available, kind of, and that movement of pieces all around. With food and beverage, it's becoming increasingly more important because of allergies and interactions of foods and touching, cross contamination and everything. So it's another, it is very expensive. It's, for a lot of these retailers, like to solve their buy online, pick up in store problem. Some retailers are using ASRS to fulfill orders in certain places. But it is a very expensive thing to do up front. So used in like highly populated areas, urban areas, the cost efficiency, can work. But in more rural areas where you've got, not as many orders and not in a larger, geographic area, the efficiencies aren't going to work quite as well. But I think it's something that, like, I'm not one of those like robots are taking over the world kind of thing, but it is something that I think we'll see more of with, fulfilling orders and inventory tracking and management. Again, it just gives you a very clear picture of what you have, what's coming in, what's going out, on time ordering, on demand ordering, fulfillment. There's less waste, especially when you're talking about perishable items, food storage, when you're talking about like frozen, and there are various levels of food freezing, deep double freeze, deep freeze, double freeze, triple freeze. These robots can come and like pick items out from these various areas of refrigeration and bring them together in a way that it allows a lot less error than human contact doing all of this. And like you said, we're at a place where the frontline workers are just harder to come by, and so you have less of a labor issue and more inventory control, more inventory management, and less error, fewer errors.
Yeah, robotics have been around forever. In fact, I worked in a factory in 1987 that my job was to put a block of aluminum inside of this receptacle, close the door, press a button, and make sure nothing broke, and this amazing part would get spit out. The challenge with all of this has been it's a very rigid system, right? And to have a system like this be less rigid, it has to have some pretty decent intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And can kind of think on the fly. And that is where machine learning and deep learning has come into play, and is becoming more of a reality and more affordable, because I can put some incredible amount of performance into one of these ASRS systems per se, and it's thinking and observing more like a human, and that's what makes this more affordable. With that said, capital expense on these things are still pretty tremendous. Now, every time we raise the minimum wage, it gets more affordable. I think we've seen, and this isn't ASRS, but I think we've seen is the minimum wage has gone up, and the challenge to find frontline workers has also gone up. You have people integrating technology to replace workers. I was at the airport last week, and I walked through, and there was a McDonald's. There was one person taking orders and 5 kiosks that were people were taking order. And that one person at the counter was there to deal with issues and literally hand the food to the people if they couldn't find their order on there. The other thing McDonald's is doing, and will have rolled out at 90% of all of its fast food restaurants, not necessarily in airports, is the first 90% of the orders are going to be taken by a machine where you talk into it. And they're working with AWS, they're working with IBM, they're working with Lenovo to put together that solution, again, to deal with the lack of frontline workers and the increased pay. And there's no way that ROI would ever make sense if the average wage in McDonald's weren't $15 now.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, interesting stuff.
Yeah. I think there's also this problem of you used to have teenagers who went and got jobs. I had a job when I was a teenager. Teenagers these days, they either don't want to work, which, too bad if that's the case. My kid worked at the restaurant down here this summer because he didn't have sports. But, they have sports. They've got all these things that they're involved in, so they don't have jobs. But when we were teenagers, we went and had jobs, and a lot of teenagers work at places like fast food, and they are these frontline workers. I was working restocking at the Price Club.
Yeah.
But now they're going to have a machine that's going to replace me.
There we go. I know there is a list of the least likely to get replaced, and a lot of this is in creative areas. But I have to tell you, and critical thinking. But I look at some of the art that got cranked out by some of these machines, and it's pretty stellar. Yeah. I saw something on Twitter. I know it must be true, but it was actually a contest to say who could crank out the coolest and the most awesome art based on machine, and it was pretty cool. So yeah, I think I'm going to be dead and buried before industry analysts are taken away. I think people will be looking for opinions, and opinions is all not just going to be about data. It's also going to be about personality and things like that. When you have companies that are marketing, you're going to have analysts to sort through what's the truth and what's not, or at least that's what I'm telling myself.
Yeah. Well, and you should tell other people that too, because the more you say it, the more it's true.
There we go. I love that. Making things happen. So, hey, we are 32 minutes in. We're having so much fun. Crazy. What is coming up next?
So we got part 3. We're going past our mid-year review. We're gonna have to go into Q2, Q3 review. But let's talk about Financial Cloud, because I think there's a whole different segment of needs and reasons why for Financial Cloud. Obviously, there's the entire security layer plus the whole legacy equipment issue that financial services deals with Financial Cloud. So we'll talk about that. I've got a couple conferences coming up. I am going. Nice. We talked about this time last year, but the PBC Conference, which is payments and banking in the cannabis industry, sounds crazy, but it is a big business, and it is very, very necessary. A very necessary, primarily unbanked business that ripe for innovation. And then Finnovate Fall, which is a big fintech conference in New York after that. So I'll be in DC and then New York and in California in between that. So on the road a bit, but analyst, as you say, #analyst life. Love it.
Exactly.
Where are you going?
Gosh, where am I going? Well, this week I'm going to go hang out at a lake, but I am actually going to take some time off. Kind of. I mean, CEO time off, where I'm just not going to do certain types of tasks, and I'm not going to have certain type of conversations. But after that, it's going to get a little crazy. I mean, gosh, head to New York City for Qualcomm's Automotive Investor Day.
Nice.
And then the following week, I'll be doing Intel Innovation. Atom Computing is doing a big grand opening and an update on their roadmap the next day. And the day after that, I'm doing NetSuite Suite World. And then the day after that, I'm doing Mobile World Congress. So the fun does not stop.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah. I'm hoping to go see Snapdragon Stadium when I'm in California.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I happen to know some people who might work at Qualcomm, and I think you might too. We might know that same person.
I
So,
do, yeah.
in fact, they made some big announcements today. I talked about it on the podcast on the 6.5 this morning
Oh, nice.
at IFA in Berlin.
Very cool.
So, anyways,
Yeah.
thanks everybody. Went a little long. Thanks for hanging in there with us, and we appreciate you. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button. If you didn't like it, send comments to Mel on Twitter or me. You can do that as well. But no, we really appreciate you, and we will see you in the next couple of weeks. Have a good one.